Hey Phil, how's it going?
Hey mate, Happy New Year. How's it going?
Happy New Year to you too. Pretty good, pretty good.
So listen, I got an email back in September from this bloke named Ben,
Yeah.
and he said, "Look, the show's great, but I wouldn't mind if you changed the theme song because it makes me sleepy." And I haven't heard from Ben since then, and I'm a bit worried that we've put him to sleep permanently with the theme
Oh
tune.
no.
So, what are your thoughts on changing the theme tune?
Yeah, I think I have a song in mind. How about this one here?
This little light of mine. No, I don't think we can use that. So I actually had one in mind. Hang on, let me play you this one.
Nah, bruh. I don't think that one's gonna work. So how about this one? I've got a really cool one that I think might work for us.
You know what? I like it. I'm sure there's going to be someone that doesn't like it though.
Yeah, I mean, there's always someone that doesn't like it. So I don't know. What do you think?
I reckon let's do it. Are you ready to start the next episode?
Yeah, roll it.
Welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast, episode number 41, the first episode for 2019. My name is Phil, and joining me, as always, is Rohan. How's it going?
Hey, I'm good, thanks.
I hope everyone had a good break. Did you have a good break, Rohan?
Yeah, it was great. Hung around, didn't do anything too exciting, so that was not a bad thing.
Lots of food.
Lots of food, lots of people. Yeah, that's about it. How about yourself?
Good. Santa was nice to me. I got a Ring doorbell for Christmas, actually.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So this episode of the Home Assistant Podcast is brought to you by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabukasa. Easily connect to Google and Amazon voice assistants for a small monthly fee that also supports the Home Assistant project. Configuration is via their user interface, so no fiddling with router settings or dynamic DNS or YAML.
So over the break, one of the exciting happenings, let's call it, was a bit of stuff happening in the community around Logitech. So if you're not familiar, essentially what happened is Logitech, long story short, they removed a local API from the Harmony hubs. So they pushed an update to the Harmony hubs, specifically it's version 4.15.206, if anyone cares. So that got pushed somewhere around mid-December. And basically the community obviously was not very happy with removing a local API. There were some security issues. There were some, I guess, some other issues as well that caused Logitech to remove this. But it was done in a way that was probably not handled the best.
No. I think they just sort of felt as though, this API, we haven't told anyone about it, why are people using it? And the security issue was, I think it was that it exposed two default accounts which had the same permissions as an authenticated user. Probably
Right.
not that's probably bad on their part for coding it that way, unless it is an actual issue with the whole XMPP protocol, which I don't think it should be. So they were just like, it's easier to just shut this whole thing down than, try and fix it. And yeah, I think they got a bit of backlash from it.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of backlash. So essentially, what had happened is, as you mentioned, they removed the API instead of fixing it, and basically on December 19th, one of the representatives from Logitech on Twitter actually mentioned, "Hey, you know what? There's really no intention of restoring that local API because you weren't supposed to be using it in the first place." They mentioned that the cloud API is also closed to new applications. So that the cloud API being what's being used for things like the Amazon Echo, SmartThings, IFTTT, and so on and so forth, right? So because that's closed also, so there's really no way around this either. And, story picked up, got picked up by Ars Technica, got picked up by The Verge. and I think from that point it's kind of pseudo blown up.
Yeah.
And then I know Home Assistant did release a new implementation, sorry, with that uses local WebSockets to communicate with the Harmony iOS app. Well, sure, that's a WebSocket that's used by the Harmony Hub to talk to the iOS app. So yeah, so that they started leveraging that as of 0.84.4.
Which was actually really good of them, because I think by then, December 20, what was it, 20th? Like, we'd already done our podcast. We were done. Like, that's it. We're going on break. You know, Logitech had put out this breaking change for everyone and broke everyone's Home Assistant integration. And then Home Assistant was like, you know what, we're gonna put out a hot fix. I'm really glad that there were people working on this over that break or over that period, and actually had a release out before Logitech had even had another option for us.
Yeah, so it's interesting because this came out on the 20th, and on the 21st, Logitech announced that they'll be coming out with a beta firmware, which will re-enable that XMPP API. But what's interesting is using beta firmware will actually void your warranty as well, right? So there's that as well.
Yeah.
So you do have to be careful by using that API.
So I think this is a PR lesson, and this isn't the first PR lesson Logitech has really had to learn. Remember, I think it was maybe 12 months ago, or just over 12 months ago, that they had the Harmony Link hub, which was their old hub that had an invalid SSL certificate, or an old SSL certificate that wasn't going to be updated. And rather than updating it, they just were like, nah, everyone that owns that hub, you're going to have to go out, buy a new one. We're not updating it. It's old technology now. Everyone picked up a stink, and they got a lot of bad press from it, and they actually had to send out a whole bunch of free Harmony hubs, which is what this whole related to. So you would think that they would have learned like their publicity lesson from last time. I know it took them a while to get back to people. There was, I think it was like, mid-December, and then they didn't get back to anyone on Twitter for a few days, or like, we'll announce something. And then it was, we have no intention of restoring local API access. And, you know, when you consider it to, we have Philips Hue that were tweeting at the same time, you know, it's always better to use a local API than it is to use the cloud. And then you've got like IKEA, which actually reached out to Home Assistant and said, hey, we know you're using our API. It's not documented, but we're making some breaking changes. You should fix it this way. So sort of It was a complete opposite way to really treat the community, and it sort of, I think it rubbed many people the wrong way. And I know it sort of feels weird that Logitech could come into your home and just issue an update and stop something that you've been using for years from working, and then just sort of tell you it's a security issue, right? Like,
yeah, and the problem is, it's, you know, what's easier, right? Is to just get rid of the API, or to actually work with people and get a secure working API, right? And I think in this case that really those are your two options, and I think in this case that Logitech kind of at the end of the day they did the right thing, but you know, the way they got to it wasn't really the best.
I think they were sort of dragged to that conclusion. They didn't want to come there willingly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Register actually also posted a I guess a little article, and it's literally labeled "A year after Logitech screwed over Harmony users, it screws over Harmony users," right? And it's interesting because that's pretty much the gist of it, right? And again, I will go out and say that they did succumb to the pressure from the community, and you know, a lot of people were using this, and they said, okay, fine, we'll make some kind of a solution for you guys. Yeah, the community was overly annoyed about it for the right reasons, right? And I think I stand with the community on this one personally. You know, but so Logitech right now, they have committed to doing this, but I'm not sure if they've actually put out instructions on, great, if you want to be a part of this beta, here's what you're going to do.
Yeah, so it's a bit tricky. You do have to use, like, I think you have to plug in the hub into the USB on your computer. You have to have some software installed. Believe there's a link on the Home Assistant blog. They were also tracking what Logitech was doing over this time. They've got a link to the instructions on how to install the beta firmware. It's available on Mac and PC, so you can do it that way. And I think Logitech said that in January they would have a production release so that you wouldn't have to install the beta if you want to enable this API again. Even if you're not a Harmony user, you might be thinking, oh, you guys, you shouldn't be using an undocumented API. It's your own fault. I can understand where people are coming from that, but also, we talk about people that don't like Xiaomi hubs on their network. They isolate them because they don't want the Chinese government to spy on them in home. It's sort of the same thing when, Logitech comes in and they just take something away from you. They for us, it was a feature. Having this Home Assistant integration was a feature, and for Logitech to come in and say, look, there's a security vulnerability, we're going to take that away from you. The best way to do it is to go through our cloud provider. History has shown that the cloud is not more secure, especially when it comes to things on your local network. Like, for this specific vulnerability, I think the only way for someone to be able to get access or root access to the hub was if they were already in your local network. So forcing a cloud connection, that means, the hub needs to be connected to the cloud. There's more chance that the cloud is going to be hacked, I think, than someone being able to get into the internal network and then finding out this Harmony hub is on the network and then getting into there. I mean, it is possible. I know it is possible, and therefore you have to address it as a security issue, but I think the chances of it were less. But I think it does also set a pretty dangerous precedent for other Internet of Things manufacturers out there if Harmony didn't retract or it didn't backstep and do what they did. Could you imagine, all of a sudden Nest decides to say, you know what, we're going to remove this feature from our product and base that on, Logitech doing something. And then, once one company does it, everyone follows suit, and then all of a sudden everyone's closing up things and we're all scrambling. So yeah, I think the reaction from the community was justified, and it's good that Logitech eventually listened.
Yeah, and I mean, I still think it was handled improperly from the get-go, especially from Logitech, again, having the debacle as the Register article mentioned it, right? Like last year or about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I guess, where they basically bricked a lot of people's Harmony hubs saying, hey, you got the old version, the certificate expires. We're not going to update it. We're just going to brick it. And because it's cloud connected, so sad, too bad, right? And I think they did come back after, again, the community blew up going, hey, what the heck? I think they did come back with saying, okay, we'll give either rebates towards new Harmony hubs, or we'll exchange it for yours, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what came out of it, but the community was obviously very annoyed that time as well. So it's kind of twice in the span of just over a year that Logitech has had to do something and then backpedal, and then so I mean, I don't know how this rubs people the wrong way or what when it comes to Logitech, but I could see that being swaying people's decisions now, right?
Exactly right. It's sort of it reminds me of when Philips Hue put an update out to their Hue hubs many years ago now, where they stopped you being able to link third-party light bulbs to your Philips Hue hub because of, once again, security concerns and all that. Even though, Zigbee is supposed to be, they were using a Zigbee light link protocol, which is supposed to be, open to anyone that's certified with that light link. You can link it. So there was a bit of a backlash there. And now Philips Hue are, they haven't done it recently, but it's still there in people's minds, right? Like, oh, they've done it before, they could possibly do it again.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, I mean, hopefully that's not the case. I know a lot of people are already invested in that Logitech ecosystem. Hopefully they continue to do the right thing without doing the wrong
Yeah.
thing first, and then having Twitter blow up and yell at them, and I think their forums were going pretty crazy too, and but I do want to give a shout out to Sean Kelly, Brent, and Tristan on Twitter, who did inform us of this, and thank you for that. And we've been kind of following that pretty closely as well
Yeah.
since that
Yeah.
point.
Well, hopefully, I think after the official release of that update of the new firmware now in this year, we will hopefully not have any more issues from Logitech.
Yeah, hope so. Let's see. I guess time will tell.
The Home Assistant Data Science portal was released. So on December 27th, just after Christmas, Home Assistant released their new Data Science portal, and the portal is available at data.home-assistant.io. It holds all the documentation for basically all the information that Home Assistant collects about your smart home. Along with the release of the portal, Robin Cole has made a Hass Data Detective Python package. And so I thought, I could talk about this with you, Rohan, or by myself, or I'll just invite Robin on. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. How you doing?
Good, thank you. So, Rob, you created the Python library that's being used by the new Data Studio, I guess you could call it, for Home Assistant. Can you tell us, what's it all used for?
So, this is a project I started maybe about 6 months ago, and I do a lot of data analysis in my job, and I was really curious to start having a look at the data inside the Home Assistant database. And we've had for a long time a few examples on the docs how to get started using Jupyter notebooks to access the Home Assistant database. So I started playing around with those, and then did have a bit of progress with that, but realized there's quite a lot of hassle when you actually want to look at the data that you've got in your database, because you have to sort of pass the data into the right format before you can start doing any analytics. So I started writing a Python library to do that called the Hass Data Detective. And that's really picked up steam in the last couple of months. And we've now released that alongside Hassio add-on. And this add-on allows you to have a Jupyter Hub, a Jupyter Lab instance running on the same Raspberry Pi as your Home Assistant. And then when you're using the Data Detective library, you can easily find your database, query it, and get all the data out into a format that you can plot using pandas. So that's really how that library's evolved.
All right. So your library will then communicate with Home Assistant and push that data into Jupyter Lab.
Kind of. I mean, so the way it works is it will literally, if you're on the Hassio add-on, it will look for your config and then find the URL and the credentials to access your database. And the whole point of the Python library really is to get your data into a pandas data frame, which is the basic structure that data scientists work with. It's kind of like a table, like an Excel, but it makes it really easy to do statistical analysis on the data, or to do plots, or even to share the data if you want to.
Okay, nice. So once someone has that data, what would you imagine someone would use that for? What did you use it? What did you think you were going to use it for?
So my original use case, actually, I was interested in the Bayesian Sensor in Home Assistant. And this is a sensor where you give it a few inputs and it basically calculates probabilities to say whether something should be in a particular state. So, for instance, you might have a sensor that you wanted to be on when you were cooking. And, the traditional way would be to have a couple of inputs and some rules. If there's motion in the kitchen and the hob is on, and the lights are on, then I'm probably cooking. And, you literally have this binary rules. But a Bayesian sensor works slightly differently. You give it probabilities that if the lights are on, that you are cooking. But it's actually a bit of a confusing sensor to use, because you have to, first of all, know the probabilities when you're not doing something, and then also the probabilities when you are doing something. So the original use case for looking at the data in the Home Assistant database, you need to ask, well, at any random time, what's the probability that I'm cooking? And then, actually calculate those statistics. So that was my use case for the library in the first place. And then I started having a bit of fun with it as well. I used to have lots of motion sensors around the house. So one of the first things I was querying was how much can I tell from the motion sensors, what I'm up to? and I had a little plot, and it showed the amount of motion per time of the day, per day of the week. And it's quite nice that the plot showed that I was really active in the house on Saturday mornings, which is the time when my wife makes me do some chores. So that was quite nice to see as well. So there was a sort of a real practical use case, and then also just curiosity, just to see what could I learn about myself from my own data.
Wow, that's really cool, because a lot of people use, like I'm using InfluxDB with Grafana to sort of see some trends, over a long period of time. So would this be similar, a use case? Would you be able to get like similar data?
Yeah, I mean, that's like sort of one thing you can do, visualization of your data. And you've got, great tools like Grafana, which allow you to make some really neat plots. But, I've not used them much myself, being more of a sort of analyst. But if you want to start doing something more complex, maybe like combining 2 or 3 different inputs to make a new sensor, or, start to do some more involved visualization, that's when the data detective and all the tools that you can use with pandas would really help you out. So that's actually one of the things I'm really excited or looking forward to seeing, is what kind of new visualizations people come up to because they got the power of pandas and all the other plotting libraries there.
Right. So can you explain what is it, pandas? What they are for someone that may never have heard of them before?
Yeah. So pandas is a Python library, and it's sort of the library data scientists use when working with tabular data. So it's got a bunch of convenience functions. You can, query. I mean, if you've got a table of data, you can say, give me the statistics on this sensor. That sensor's one column in your table. And then you can plot that. And you could then say, well, how does that correlate with other sensors in my table? And you might identify that 2 sensors are very strongly correlated, and that might tell you something about something that's going on in your home, for instance.
Ah, right. So it sort of allows you to, see, trends over time and put that into sort of a human readable way, basically.
Yeah. I mean, so it allows you to ask questions about your data, And if you think about what is a data scientist, if I plot some sensor data and I make a judgment about what's going on based on what I see, I think that makes me a data scientist. And obviously, Grafana lets you do that. But when you really want to sort of start delving deep into the data, I think actually getting closer to the data using something like pandas is going to give you a lot more flexibility.
So with your Python library now and the Hassio add-on that was added in late December 2018, is there the ability for, I think JupyterLab has like machine learning as well? Have you used JupyterLab with Home Assistant yet?
Pandas is part of an ecosystem of data science libraries. So you've got pandas, you've got scikit-learn, for instance, and that's another Python library which allows you to do different kind of modeling. So like typically it's a classification modeling or a regression where you're trying to predict some value on a line. So within the Python ecosystem, once you've got your data into a pandas data frame, it's available to do analysis of any kind of Python library that you want. So that was really my goal in creating the library, is to get that data into a format where anybody can start doing their own analytics with it. One use case might be if you want to come up with a machine learning model, which takes a few different inputs and then maybe makes a prediction about what's going on. So abstract things like, is it a quiet time at home? I often hear on the forums, people say things like, I want a sensor which tells me when the baby is asleep so that the front doorbell rings on a more muted tone. One of the things you might struggle to do traditionally is to create a sensor that would do that, but you may be able to create a machine learning model which should actually do that for you.
Ah, okay. That's very neat. If I've got the data in Home Assistant and will it automatically import like anything that's in my database existingly will your package handle like history of my data that's already in my database, or will it only start pushing data that's come in right now?
So the way the library works is it just makes a SQL query against your database. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either say, give me all the data in my database as a pandas data frame, which is, the most convenient thing if your database isn't too big. Obviously, you've got like gigabytes and gigabytes in your database that you're probably going to run out of memory. Yep. So in that case, you need to refine the data that you look at. And so the data detective you can pass it a list of, say, numerical sensors that you care about, and it will return just those as a pandas data frame, and everything's in the right format to immediately start doing plots or analysis. Some people, I think, are probably running database servers, and they might have huge amounts of data. So obviously, they would probably need to explore that data a bit more carefully to decide what was worth looking at. But the detective should make all that really straightforward.
Wow, that's awesome. So if someone doesn't have Hass.io, is it possible to install your data detective just by itself?
Absolutely. I mean, the data detective is a Python library, so as long as you're confident, working with Python, we've got some basic instructions to get you started, and you can create your own Python environment, import, install data detective, give it the URL or basically the path to your database, and it should work exactly the same as if you were running the Hass.io add-on. Yeah, so we've got numerical data in there as well. We've also got binary sensor data. In the future, hopefully we can bring in categorical data as well. So this would be sensors that store like string or text information. So we've got some ambitions for this library, and we're really keen.
Yeah, so obviously you're going to be working on it for quite some time, still adding, as feature requests come through, you're going to be tinkering with it and adding new features.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about the Home Assistant community is they're so creative. So part of this was to say, well, let's make this easy for people. Let's put this tool out there and see what kind of things people want to do with it, and that will help us, develop the package in the future. So I'm really excited to see what people will do with this, basically.
Yeah. And Jupyter Lab is the user interface that people can use to then use all this data that your Python library is pushing out or sucking out of Home Assistant.
Right. Yeah. Jupyter Lab. It's kind of a big project, but basically you have a little mini server running, and you have these notebook files. So if you're familiar with the traditional way of programming, maybe you're familiar with sitting at a terminal and sort of typing commands. Jupyter Lab takes a slightly different take on that. You actually enter commands inside a document, which is kind of a living document, and you can have instructions written in Markdown in there. You can have graphs printed out. You can export the notebook as a PDF if you want to and share that with people. It's kind of an interactive environment that you really need to experience to appreciate what it's all about.
And this is all processing locally, isn't it? There's no requirement for anything to go to the cloud.
Yeah,
it's all done locally, isn't it?
I mean, you can run this on a Raspberry Pi, and that in itself, I think, is quite a nice achievement.
Yeah, that is awesome. I know a lot of people. You see, like all this, you talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence and having to use the cloud for all that, but it's good to see that, keeping all that data locally, especially if there's Home Assistant grabs so much data from all these sensors and all that, keeping it all locally as opposed to having to push it all up to the cloud to get it analyzed by some supercomputer.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Sort of chat around machine learning and AI, but really, you can get your hands on the tools and get started. You don't need a supercomputer. So I think that's really exciting that the Hass.io add-on shows that that's possible.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm really excited to see what other feature requests you get and how people are going to use this. I'm sure people, once they've got their heads around it, I know I'm still struggling on how I'm going to get it to work, but yeah, once people start using it and finding out, the interesting stories that their house data can tell them, I think you'll have a lot of interesting feature requests coming your way.
Yeah, like we had one guy, and he's got multiple sensors in his home that track the energy usage. And so he wants to be able to both monitor his energy usage, but also to create a machine learning model that will predict it. And then you can start thinking about things like, okay, well, let's make that prediction do something in the home, like predict our bill next month or give us advice on how to reduce our bill. So there's lots of cool things I think people will start to do with this. And hopefully if people put their ideas on the forums, we can have a really exciting community around data science as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for jumping on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil, for the invite.
All right. And in other sad Home Assistant news, Stephen, aka Black Gold 9, who was on episode 35 of the Home Assistant podcast, he's moving on from developing for the Home Assistant iOS app. So Stephen has made some great contributions to the iOS app. So thank you for your hard work, Stephen. We are going to miss you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for those that aren't familiar, or if you didn't listen to episode 35, basically the current iteration of the iOS app, so the version, I guess they call it 1.5, is essentially like that was mostly led by Steven, and Robbie's going to be doing 2.0, I believe.
So yeah, hopefully the iOS app continues its development. I know Robbie's going to have a lot of work on his hands.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we are here in doing an episode, which means there must be a new release, and that is 0.85.
There is. I guess to start off, there's some new air pollutants components. So essentially, the idea is how does Home Assistant report different air pollutants and things like that? So essentially, it's kind of like how the weather component works, right? So before there was the dark sky component and this and that, and then it kind of got all consolidated under the weather component so that it's standardized. So same thing, except now we're doing it with air pollutants. So there's I think it's OpenSense Map that's going to be the first sensor to actually report data to that platform. So so that should be nice. So a little more standardization going on there from an air pollutant perspective.
Yeah, because I know there's a few. There's like pollen and like a lot of health ones as well. So I wonder if they will fall under this umbrella too. We'll see in the next few releases, I guess.
Yeah, I'm assuming those are eventually going to get rewritten to work with this. So.
Lutron Homeworks component has been added in this release. So Lutron made the Homeworks Series 4 and 8 systems apparently about 15 years ago. So there you go.
Wow.
So these components now have the lights and binary sensors integrated into Home Assistant.
Very cool. Also on more Lutron news, so if you are part of the Lutron Radio RA2 platform, switches and scenes are now added.
And also another platform, the Nest alarm panel, NESS, not Nest. The connectivity between Home Assistant and the alarm is done through an IP232 module that you need to have connected to your alarm panel. So if you're in the Nest ecosystem, you can now have that integrated with Home Assistant.
Here's one we don't see every day, the ID Tech proximity card component. So if you use prox cards for access control, so a lot of offices use proximity cards to let you into a door, so on and so forth, based on who you are. A lot of hotels use it as well for your hotel room door. So ID Tech makes ID systems that essentially accept these proximity cards. So now that's now can be controlled via Home Assistant. So you just need a serial through Ethernet converter, and there's an event fired anytime there's a card swiped.
So we were talking about Dr. ZZ's just offline before, Rohan, and I remember I think he's done a video on a electronic lock that he's put on his garage. Mm-hmm. I think I watched a live stream where he wasn't being used at the moment, but this reminds me of something like this would be like a cool use case for that lock, where he could, have, basically like you do in an office building, right? Just have a little electronic keypad, Home Assistant sees, okay, this key card has been scanned, unlock the lock here.
Yeah. So, there's some interesting things you could do with it. So that's, it's kind of cool. I'd be interested to see if Home Assistant takes on more commercial applications with solutions like these. So.
That's true. Also, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. I really, this is one of my favorite additions in this release. Do you remember? I think it was John Maddox had the magic cards where you would grab a NFC card and add it to play, and you would tap it on a Raspberry Pi, and it would then play that song on Spotify. I'm wondering, like, you could do something similar, like, if you tap on it at a certain location in the house or wherever, or you pick up a certain card and it detects that card number, it could do an action. So there's a lot of cool automation ideas with these proximity cards.
Yeah, totally. There's that should be pretty interesting. Again, if anybody's doing any of those. Anything interesting with that, shoot us a note at feedback@haspodcast.io.
And another new platform is the Pencom Relay control boards. So if you have a control board, which I think is used for they have the ability for Raspberry Pis, I think. Anyway, so it's basically very simple. It allows you to turn a relay on or off, and the state of that relay can now be read in Home Assistant.
Also, the Plum LightPad light switches. As the name suggests, they're light switches that are Wi-Fi based that can be configured now through Home Assistant.
Nice. And LCN, which stands for Local Control Network, which is a well-known and popular home automation system in Germany that is now supported in Home Assistant.
Yeah, there's also the Raspberry RFM switch platform. They're 433 megahertz RC devices that are that essentially use a gateway. Normally, they're used via Conair or ITGW 433 or again our Raspberry RFM gateways themselves. So those are now integrated into Home Assistant as well.
And if you have an ambient weather station, you can now have your own weather reported via the ambient weather personal weather station component, and I'm guessing that will just come in as Home Assistant as another sensor that you can add in.
Yep, and here's a weirdly named one, the Mythic Beasts DNS API component. So essentially, it's another DNS component for the service called Mythic Beasts.
I'm guessing that's going to be similar to like Duck DNS or something.
Yeah, exactly. I guess they similar, same kind of service where again it takes your public IP and updates that to like like phil.mythicbeasts.com or org or what have you, right? So yeah, this is actually one I haven't heard of. So that is pretty interesting. I love the name.
Beast,
I would never guess that that's a DNS service, but it's that is pretty cool.
Also, Otto Winter has been very busy over the break. He's done some various updates to ESP Home Lib, and it looks like there's going to be soon support for native support for ESP Home Lib devices in Home Assistant, and you'll be able to configure those from the user interface. The groundwork is being done in this release. I'm not sure if it will be completely ready in 0.85, but definitely look out for some changes coming in 0.86.
Very cool. Yeah. And we had Otto on a while ago. Wow, it's been a while now. And great work, Otto. Also, the after-ship package sensor. So similar to, there's a couple of package tracking services that's integrated into Home Assistant now. So this is aftership.com. So apparently they support 490 couriers worldwide, assumably the big ones too.
So I think there's a few now. And I think another one is 17track.net, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been jealous. I remember when the UPS sensor came out, and I was like, oh man, that's cool. Like, why can't wouldn't it be cool like if I could have that here in Australia, right? But no, it's UPS. It's got to be the States. But now with these services like 17track.net and now Aftership, it's cool that you can basically just type in any tracking number and have that information carried into Home Assistant.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden you can have like your lights turn red or something when your package is delivered, whatever that means.
All right, and I guess I get draw the short straw and trying to pronounce this one, which is Brottsplarketen. Everyone from Sweden is going to be laughing at me trying to pronounce that. It is a Swedish site for tracking crimes happening all around Sweden. And the sensor can be used to track a certain area, for example, where you live. So that's pretty interesting. I'm not too sure how it works completely. Maybe someone from Sweden can let us know. Maybe, if there's I'm not sure if it does it based on trends, like, there's a high crime rate in this neighborhood, or if it's similar to maybe like an Amber Alert, if a child goes missing, this sensor can pick up, okay, a child's gone missing, send out this alert. So, yeah, check out the docs, and if you're in Sweden, you might find this one interesting.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. Again, I've said this a few times when I love stuff around personal safety, right?
Yeah.
So this is great. So also we have another Italian fuel price sensor. It's the Prezibenzina sensor. I'm probably butchering that as well. So I apologize if I did, but now you got that in Home Assistant as well.
And also from Italy, there's a new bus sensor as well, the GTT sensor, so you can work out when the next bus is coming.
And similarly, for the Belgians, there's the new Belgian railway sensor as well, so the NMBS service.
And also, finally, wrapping up the new components for this one is an Islamic prayer time sensor. So, yeah, that's cool.
It's interesting. There's quite a few, regional specific or community specific services, like the Italian bus service or the Islamic prayer time service or the Italian fuel price. So that's it's weird. Usually we'll see a couple of releases, but I guess there's like 4 or 5 just released.
I guess that's what happens when
just all in a row.
Yeah, when you skip a release and everyone's on holiday for the holiday season, and everyone's got a bit of spare time to help out.
Yeah, that's right. So with that though, there are some breaking changes. Freebox routers, for example, have been moved to their own component now. So if you're using Freebox as a device tracker, you essentially need to remove it from the YAML and add it as its own component. So with this also, you've got some new sensors that do things like monitoring your traffic usage, for example.
Ah, nice.
So so it's been split off and moved into its own piece.
Cool. And probably an important one from a security perspective, auto-targeting of all entities has been deprecated as of this release. So previously, you could, if you were calling a service, and you would do this usually from the call services UI. If you didn't specify an entity ID, for example, if you were to call the service light.turnon or automation.turnoff, and you didn't specify an entity ID, what would happen is that Home Assistant would default to turning everything on or off.
Right.
So that's kind of not a good idea, especially as Home Assistant is starting to move into the realm of rooms and users with permissions and everything like that. So moving forward, you will need to specify all, ALL, as the entity ID if you do actually want to tell Home Assistant, yes, I really mean to turn everything on or off. For the moment, a warning message will be printed if you don't specify an entity ID, but just keep an eye out. If you are relying on this, it might be time to update your automations.
Yeah, and it's probably for the best to do that, right?
Yeah.
Having a blank as a wildcard could be potentially dangerous, depending on what's set up as what. So also the scan interval for the weather component has been updated. So it was 15 seconds. Now it's 30 seconds to align with all the other sensor platforms as well. So that's just specifically for the weather component.
And 17track.net, the component I just mentioned before, the entity IDs might be changing in this release. So there might be some slight updates to watch out for.
Also, the climate platforms EQ3 and KNX have been updated. So the way their operational modes work, basically there have been changes so that the Amazon Echo and Google Home can actually support those services as well.
And Dakin has been moved to the config flow in Home Assistant. So the settings for monitored conditions have also been removed. So if you're using the Dakin component for, I think it's climate, just watch out for this release.
Yeah, and one that might affect a couple more people is the Wemo component. So entity ID is now required for if you use the set humidity service. So if you use that, then make sure you have the entity ID. And
in a little noteworthy update for this release, new events have been added to the timer component. So if you use timers maybe to turn lights off after motion has been detected or whatever, there's now new events, and the timers are started, paused, or restarted, and restarted is fired when a timer has been paused and is now moves back into the started status. So yeah, that's cool for the timer component. I'm a fan of the timer component, so it's always good to get new events for that.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And another release, so just a heads up, we are recording this while it is beta. And I've seen a bit of chatter that there is a potential for entity IDs to be changing in this release if you're using special characters or Unicode characters in a name. So generally this is for something that is not a Latin character. You might have a Chinese character in your name, and then Home Assistant generates an entity ID from that. As of this release, Home Assistant is going to try and just make those a bit more standard, so you may get some random situations where an entity ID will change moving forward in this release.
Interesting.
And I think I promised last time that Lovelace would be released, and we haven't forgotten. Lovelace was meant to be released in 0.85. It looks like it's now going to be pushed back to 0.86. They do want to make sure that everything is top-notch with it. It is going to be the default UI, so they're taking a bit more time, but yeah, Lovelace coming next release. But this time I won't promise.
Perfect. And
unless you have anything else you would like to add, Rohan, I think that is it for us.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of news that's happened over the last couple of weeks, so I think we should be good for now.
We'll see everyone next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Special thanks to this week's guest, Robin Cole. If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest yourself, reach out to us at feedback@haspodcast.io.
The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to the topics discussed this week, check out the show notes at haspodcast.io.